Now, this one I know is going to be a big shock considering the YouTube channel is built of our giants. 16 to 18 wins. I think losing Selby.
It's been a while. Obviously, last year, in terms of the season and how it was, didn't really go according to plan. And to be honest, it got to a point where I was just kind of getting burnt out, and I just needed a big break. So, if you want to skip straight to the actual segment of the video, link or a timestamp rather will be down in the description box. But otherwise, just a few quick things I want to clear up. I'm going to be changing the way I might approach vlogs this year if I do the vlogs. The vlogs probably will be more focused around the bigger games. I found, at least for me, vlogging every single game was quite a bit of a grind, and to be honest, there was probably a lot of those games where like people aren't really interested to tune into that vlog, and therefore it wasn't really that entertaining. So I'd rather try and focus vlogs on games that I think should be interesting, bigger blockbuster games, stuff like that. You think about like the Carltons, the Collingwoods, the Easter Monday clash, even though Hawthorn's inside, that's not really a top contender at the moment. Normally those games can produce some decent content just because of that rivalry, if you will, and kind of just try to focus more on games where I feel like I can get some better value out of them for the vlog. So I'm going to try and maybe make it more focused on the more exciting games. With that being said, though, the videos will be starting to come back for the 24 season. Just like you watching this video, I assume most of us are looking forward to another season of some football, and hopefully, we could play a bit better this year and place a bit higher on the ladder. I will come out with a ladder prediction in the next video, so make sure you tune in for that to see where I think all the teams should be falling into this year. But for today's video, we're going to be looking at the 2023 predictions that I made as I just switched scenes. So here I've got my video. I'm not going to go through the whole thing because it's like a 40-minute video, as you can see down on the bottom. So I'm going to try and like cut it into segments and give like my quick recap on why I had placed those teams as low or as high as I did in comparison to where they actually finished. And just a general summary of, do I think they might be in the same spot, or do I think they could look to improve, and just other general comments. So we'll look through at my predictions today, see what I got right, see what I got wrong, see where I was about spot on the money. With that being said, let's get into today's video where we will look at where my predictions were from 2023 and see how right or wrong I was.
The first team I want to talk about, we're going to be moving from bottom to the top. So in 18th spot, I've got the Hawthorn Hawks. In the 17th spot, I've got the GWS Giants. They have a really bad run with maintaining talent, don't they? Just 2 to 3 wins. They're another young side that just struggle to maintain it. So in 16th spot, I've got the Westcoast Eagles, 3 to 5 wins. So I've got them edging out the bottom 2 teams. Round off our bottom 4, I've got the St Kilda Saints. Now, this is probably one of the first controversial calls I have going into this video. This one's a big one. I know this is a big call, and I know a lot of people are thinking, like, oh, what do you mean? They were a top 4 side going into round 9.
All right, so recapping our bottom 4 that I had predicted. So I had Hawthorn at 18th, I had GWS at 17th, I had West Coast at 16th, and I had St Kilda at 15th as like the bottom 4. Now, if you're wondering why I'm kind of looking to the side here, I've got an additional monitor where it kind of just shows me some relevant information. So this video is reasonably smooth, but just to get into it very quickly. So West Coast, I was pretty spot on with. Well, actually, we'll go in order, right? So Hawthorn, I predicted them to be bottom 4, but I didn't think they would get more than 3 wins at all. But you know what? I think I still think I was more or less on the money. The only thing I could maybe try and maybe try and relook at my situation with was they actually had more talent on that side than they did. And I think the only big issue they had was just converting in a lot of the games that they were playing. They actually finished 16th in the 23 season with 7 wins. I didn't think they would have any more than 3. I thought any more than 3 would be pushing it. Like I thought they would be bottom 2 guaranteed. So credit to them. Yes, they did finish bottom 4. So realistically, like when I did this bottom 4, like I had it where the teams could probably mix and match anywhere. Like it wasn't necessarily a definite spot. The only team that I thought might have been that one team that could jump in or out of that bottom 4 would be the Saints, which is why I rated them so highly with wins at the retrospective time. But I think Hawthorn did a lot better than what I thought they were going to do, but they did still finish in that bottom 4 as predicted. GWS at 17th. Now, this one's a howler. I had them at 2 to 3 wins. I thought they were going to be absolutely pathetic. I'd lost a lot of depth in their side. Like, I didn't think they'd be... I thought they were a lot for a bottom 4, and they finished... Not only did they finish 7th, but they also made a prelim, and to be honest, weren't that far off from a grand final appearance. So, well done to the Giants. They proved that they're going to be a very solid side going forward, and that they do actually have the talent to compete. Do I think they're going to contend in 24? That'll be for a later video. But what I will say is they're probably not going to be a bottom 4 side for 2024. Like a lot of things that have to go terribly wrong for them to be a bottom 4 side. So again, credit where credit's due. I was wrong on this one. Very, very wrong on this one. Westcoast, I had them at 16th. And I was somewhat spot on with this one. 3 to 5 wins. They did finish the year with the 3 wins. So I was about right on the money. But, gee, I thought Westcoast were going to naturally improve a bit. Because especially, like, you can see here, like, what I've got kind of written down as one of my notes when I was making this, like, slideshow. I say here that they can only really get better after the 2022 season, but to be honest, they probably did just about the same. You could argue it was even worse. There was a lot of games last year where they weren't just losing, they were getting smacked. And I mean, like, it wasn't even a competition to the point where, like, I would not blame West Coast fans if for a lot of those games at, like, halftime, they said, you know what, let's just go home and watch a movie, Like, it was just absolutely terrible. So, I felt bad, and I still do. And I honestly do hope that they can just, I just hope they can improve this year because, obviously being the biased Cats supporter, Geelong supporter, stuff like that, like, I want to make sure that my club is like the first club that's doing well, that's winning games and stuff like that. But man, when you see a team like West Coast just be the butt of the joke ever since COVID, really, you'd think there's got to be a high point at some point. Like, you got to remember, it wasn't that long ago when the Eagles weren't necessarily just contending in finals, but they actually won a flag in 2018. And that feels like it's been like well over a decade ago now. And really, it's only been like what, like 6 years since they won a flag, and they're this bad. Man, it feels bad. So unfortunately, or fortunately, depends how you want to look at it, I was spot on pretty much with this prediction. Bottom 4, about 3 wins, 3 to 5 I've got here, but they finished with 3, and yeah, just a bit of a terrible season, as many suspected, that I suspected as well, for the West Coast Eagles. This one, like I said, I did say in the video, this was a controversial call, and credit where credit's due, they did prove me wrong. I had St Kilda at 15th, and they finished 6th. Now, let me make something clear, though. Even though the Saints, and I know I might get a lot of hate from Saints fans that are watching this video, so just precautionary. even though the Saints finished 6th in 2023 and ended up with, how many wins was it? 13 wins, which is a pretty good result. 13 wins, 10 losses. In my opinion, they were arguably one of, if not the worst teams to have made it in the top 8. Let me explain. They were getting through a lot of games that they probably shouldn't have won by the scruff of their teeth. But in saying that, they did a lot better than where I predicted them to be. They were a much better side than I thought they were going to be. Do I think they were the worst side in the top 8? Yeah, I probably do think they were the worst side in the top 8. But were they better than a lot of teams that were below them? Yeah, probably. There's probably only really a couple of teams you could have argued that would have been just as good or better than them. You could think about a Bulldogs, you could think about an Adelaide, But realistically speaking, like, they were a lot better than where I had predicted them in this video. So again, credits to the Saints. They were a pretty solid side. But, again, like, it's one of those things where, like, they did better than what I predicted them to be, but I don't really think they were as good as a side as they statistically showed to be in 2023. But that is for another conversation in another video. Regardless, the point stands. I was incorrect about this. So let's look at our next lot of teams. This will be from 14th to 10th, and we're looking at teams that were competitive enough to avoid the bottom 4, but at times were kind of dipping and diving, bobbing and weaving in and out of finals contention.
Next team I want to talk about. So a team that I think will be on a bit of a rise is North Melbourne. 5 to 8 wins. I've got them going into the new year. They obviously got their new head man. In 13th spot, I've got the Essendon Bombers with about 7 to 10 wins. So a bit of a jump up from like that bottom 5 teams, I want to say. Key points to address, Brad Scott comes in to help. In 12th spot, I've got the Adelaide Crows with about 7 to 10 wins. The key points that I want to focus on is that they've got a really impressive young core that looks to improve even further. And to be honest, on their day, this team is tough to beat in Adelaide. Now, I don't know if you'd call this like that much of a shock call, but they were a team that not only made finals last year, but were a team that were one of the talking points to have won the flag at points in the 2020. Now, this is a very big call, and I know there's going to be a lot of Fremantle Docker fans that are going to be livid with this prediction. But hear me out. In 10th spot, I've got the Fremantle Dockers with 11 to 14 wins.
All right. So just going back into it now. So I had North Melbourne at 14th. I had Bombers at 13th. I had the Crows in 12th. Western Bulldogs in 11th. And Fremantle Dockers in 10th. Now, the North Melbourne thing, I'll just quickly explain it. So my thought process behind here was that, they have now a great coach in Clarkson, and there's a lot of great talent in that side. And don't get me wrong, there is some good talent there. There is a lot that can be like explored and work with. And I do genuinely believe that North Melbourne will probably improve somewhat going into the 2024 season. Do I think they're going to improve by an exponential amount? No. Do I think there is going to be an improvement? Yeah, I'm pretty confident that there should be some sort of improvement. With that being said, though, they did finish with 3 wins, meaning they were 17th on the ladder, only beating Westcoast for the wooden spoon by percentage. It was by like 18%, something like that. So, they were very poor. But in all fairness, Clarkson wasn't also there for a lot of the season. There was a lot of stuff that was going on behind the scenes and stuff like that. So he wasn't actually really there to properly coach the side until kind of later points in the season. And by then, the identity and the game plans from the team had already been set. So it was just one of those seasons where it was just a bit of a throwaway. With that being said, though, I was quite wrong in this prediction. I did say here that they could be a team that could sneak into that bottom 4, but I thought they would probably be better than bottom 4 contention. But yeah, they were definitely not near this mark at all. They could be near this mark going into 24. Like, if I was to do a prediction, I might have North Melbourne in similar prediction, but don't know yet. That'll obviously become relevant once I actually start making that prediction video. But yeah, incorrect with this one. In 13th, I had the Essendon Bombers. So they actually finished 11th in the season, and they had 11 wins. So they had more wins than I thought they would have. Like, I thought their max range would be 10. They had one extra. But other than that, that was pretty much spot on. Like, they finished 11th. I said 13th. I said the ladder range would be anywhere between 10th to 14th, which is about the range where they finished. So pretty much a pretty good guess there. Like, I'm only off by about 2 spots. So I'll take that. I'll definitely take that. I think that was a pretty solid prediction from me. Well done, past me. Then in 12th spot, I had the Adelaide Crows, and they did finish 10th. Now, many would argue that they should have finished higher because of the whole controversy that happened in the last game of the season. They should have been in the finals, and I should have been off by quite a substantial bit. But unfortunately, for the Adelaide Crows and for the fans and everyone else involved, that wasn't the case. It was ruled not to be a goal, and therefore they finished where they finish. But that's for another topic, another day. Regardless, looking at it as a raw prediction, 12th with 7 to 10 wins with a range of 11 to 16th. They finished higher than I had in my range. They actually finished 10th. Like I said, they were only really one goal away from making a finals. But regardless, I was kind of there. I was probably a little bit wrong. Like, I had them a little bit underrated than where they actually finished. But otherwise, I was pretty much on the money here. So, you know, like I said here, even in my key point, they have a really good young core that will improve, and they are tough to beat over there, and they proved to just do that. I think they won most of their games at home. I don't think they dropped that many. It might have been like 2 or something. I'd have to fact check it. But yeah, they are super tough to beat in Adelaide. So, you know, credit to them. They were very competitive, and that's where I thought they would be. I thought they would be a competitive side. But yeah, I was probably a little bit off the mark, but at the same time, I was not that far off. So pretty solid prediction there. Pretty happy with that one. And then in 11th spot, I had the Western Bulldogs. They finished 9th. So they missed out on playing finals by 2 match points. So by a draw, by a tie. I had them with 10 to 12 wins for the season, and they actually finished with 12 wins, so on the higher end of my range. Obviously, I said they finished 11th, they finished 9th, and I had them ladder range between 8th and 13th because, you know, like I said in the video, they're a pretty inconsistent side, and I pretty much hit the nail on the head with this one. Yeah, I probably could have shoved them a little bit higher, but it's really just like what I've said here in my key point. When they're on, like when this Bulldog side is like up and running, they are top 4 quality. They are a team that can cause a lot of damage in the finals. But when they are bad, when they are off, man, are they off. They are so bad. Like, we're talking like, you know, like they'll struggle to beat like our Westcoast side, you know? They might still beat them because the raw talent they have on the field is just better than what the West Coast could produce. But man, when they're bad, they are bad. So it's that inconsistency, like that gap between their best and their worst was why I had them where I had put them. And their season kind of reflected that, you know, 12 wins, 11 losses, very middle of the park. They were probably good enough to play in the finals, but at the same time, I'm not really surprised that they missed out. So this prediction, again, like the placement's a bit off, but the kind of summary point I've got with like their wins range, their key points, and the stuff I mentioned in the video as well, was pretty much like nail on the head. Like they're just a very inconsistent side. and that kind of cost them in the end. And then this last one, I had the Fremantle Dockers finishing 10th. Now, at the time, this was a very controversial call, considering that the previous year in 22, they actually had a pretty solid finish. They were really up there. They were looking like they were going to be a team that would be a regular finals appearance team. But the biggest issues I had at the time, and I still do even at the conclusion of 23, was that the teams that were around their ballpark figure, that kind of bottom half of the top 8 to the 4 teams above the bottom 4, were teams that were getting better. They were improving. They were adding stocks to the list. And they weren't really. Like, they brought in some players, but nothing really like X Factor worthy or anything that could change like the scope of the club. So they kind of just stayed where they were. And as a result, they just naturally got shoved down. But they got shoved down a lot more than I thought they would. They finished 14th. 14th. They barely missed out on a bottom 4 finish by 1 win. 1 win made them avoid bottom 4. They finished with 10 wins with a percentage of like 96%, and finished 14th. I had them finishing 10th with a range of 11 to 14 wins. But I had them as a team that could play finals because, again, they played finals last year. In 22, if I'm not mistaken. And they were probably expected to just kind of be the same ballpark figure. But, yeah, so I was technically right on this call. It was controversial at the time, but I had a feeling that the Dockers were just not going to be that good going into 23. But, geez, when you think about it, they were a lot worse than you would have suspected them to be. So there's that.
And it's probably the worst spot to finish.
Yeah,
in the
it
year,
is.
Or one of the worsts. You know, you've got the wooden spoon, which no one likes to finish, but then you've also got this spot, the cursed 9th spot, where you were good enough to win so many games in the year, where it was kind of worth to go watch your team play. But you just weren't good enough to just get 1 or 2 more stupid wins to get yourself into the 8. You know, that one game that you lost by 4 points because the umpire didn't call push in the back, costed you a final spot kind of thing, right?
So in the 9th spot, I had predicted the Gold Coast Suns with about 11 to 14 wins. I had them ranging being a team that could play the finals or would just miss out. Now, in retrospect, the Gold Coast Suns did not finish 9th. In fact, they did not even finish outside of the bottom 4. They finished 15th, the top end of the bottom 4, but still was the bottom 4. They finished 15th with 9 wins, with a percentage of 91%. And look, they were a competitive side, and at times they looked like they were probably going to play finals. But I think they suffered the same fate that the Bulldogs suffered to a more higher extremity, where their bad performances were just really bad. Like, we're talking like it stank. So I had faith in Gold Coast to be that team that could maybe pinch a spot in the finals, but geez, they ended up finishing bottom 4. So this prediction was off. Obviously, it was the Bulldogs who suffered the 9th spot curse for the 23 season. But yeah, so this is the prediction that I had at 9th, and it was quite off by quite a bit. So a bit unfortunate. But we will now look at the most exciting time of the prediction. Who did I think was going to play finals? And spoiler alert, there's going to be a few predictions in here that were quite wrong. Let's go into it and see what I had to say.
The first team I want to talk about, who I've got an 8th spot, is the Richmond Tigers. Hold up a second. Richmond were a pretty solid team in 2022. They were kind of unfortunate, if anything, to finish as low as they did. Let me explain. 12 to 15 wins. They did add in some good talent in Hopper and Taranto, but their predictable attack style game plan might not be as effective nowadays. In 7th spot, I've got the Carlton Blues. I think I think they just have to make finals this year. They really, really have to. 12 to 15 wins. They were in the top conversation for pretty much all of that 2022 season till the last few minutes of their final match of the year.
Lost the Collingwood in the last round.
With that being said, it was actually a really good, solid year overall. I think a lot of Carlton fans have to realize or remember that they were a team that were struggling for quite a few years. The 6th spot. Now, this one probably is a bit controversial because a lot of people don't really have Port Adelaide as a team that they rate going into the 23 season, but I've got them in 6th. 12 to 15 wins. They did start the 22 season 0-5, which is really, really bad for a team that was probably expecting to have made finals based off their 21 season performance. But since that moment, they actually went 10-7, which means at that kind of pace, they would have been a top 8 side. They probably, if they had went 10-7 for their first 17 games of the season, and then the 5 games that they lost, if they had won 2 or 3 of them, they probably would have been a team that finishes 6th or 7th last year. 5th spot, again, another controversial one, if you will. Have got the Sydney Swans, 14 to 16 wins. They were the runners-up of the 2022 season. Buddy is going around another year. They have a great core. They have good culture. They should still be competitive going into the year. Honestly, though, with the top 4 teams that I currently have, which you should have guessed who those top 4 teams are by now, it's just a matter of order. It's going to be hard to crack that top 4. Especially considering that these 4 teams have either improved their side by some substantial margin, or they have a really, really good young core.
All right, so looking at it, at my bottom half of the top 8, I had Richmond finishing in 8th spot. I had the Blues in 7th. 6th spot, I had Port Adelaide. And in 5th spot, I had the Swans. So start with Richmond and kind of my breakdown on it. So Richmond were a team that I felt was still, they still had a solid enough list to be competitive. And in retrospect, looking at it, they probably did have a decent enough list to be competitive, but they finished 13th in the season with 10 wins. I had them in a range of 12 to 15. I didn't think they would be any lower than 12 wins, and they finished with 10 wins and ultimately out of the finals. So that prediction was quite wrong, quite off the mark. I thought there would be definitely a team that should be contending for a final spot, and they weren't really. Not really. When you think about it, the team that finished 8th and Richmond who finished 10th, it was really only a difference of, say, 2 wins and some percentage. But the point still stands that they weren't really a top 8 side. I thought, Hopper and Taranto was going to be good enough talent to kind of help fill the gaps that they had, but it didn't really manifest in that way. And yeah, I guess their game style was just a bit too predictable to the point where they just weren't really as effective, and they were just a bit slow sometimes even. They would try to play a game style that wasn't suited to them, and then they got punished even more because of that fact. So this one was wrong by quite a bit. We move on. In 7th, I had the Carlton Blues, 12 to 15 wins. Now, in 2022, they finished 9th due to a last-minute winner, pretty much, by the Collingwood side. So throughout the whole year in 2022, they were constantly in the top 8, and everyone had faith that they would just finish in the top 8 for them to only have it stolen from them in the literal last minute or two or whatever it was in the last home of the away season of the 22 games for them. So I had them finishing 7th with a range wins of 12 to 15, and they actually finished 5th with 13 wins. So technically I was pretty spot on with this one. The placement's obviously a little bit off, but the wins range is about on the mark. The ladder range I didn't think they would finish higher than 6th, but they did finish 5th, so I guess I was wrong on that. But yeah, you know what? Carlton, they played pretty good. I thought they were good enough to at least play finals, and they definitely did that, to the point where they were able to even get some wins in the finals campaign and play really good football. So, going into the 24 season, they look to be a team that will continue to be competitive. Will they improve upon last season? Kind of hard to tell at this stage, but yeah, I think they're a team that will be there to stay in the finals race going forward. So yeah, this prediction I'm pretty happy with. I can't really complain about this prediction too much. In 6th place, I had the Port Adelaide Power. Now, as of this recording, or as of that recording, I should say, the Power weren't really rated as a team that would play finals, right? They weren't, just flat out. They had a really poor start to the 22 season, and as the 22 season concluded, I think they finished like 10th or something like that. They finished like outside the top 8. But I was looking at it realistically, and you can see here, like I even have it in my notes, and I mentioned it in the recording. They went 10-7 since they had that 0-5 start. So, in theory, they were on track to be like a top 8 team. Like if this was the other way around, where they start the season 10-7, and then they don't lose these 5, right? They win like 2 or 3 of them. They would probably finish around about where I had them predicted. About that kind of 7th, 6th range. So yeah, that was kind of like my logic behind it, was that they did show after that 0-5 start that they are actually a side that can play well. And granted, to their credit, they actually finished 3rd. They finished 3rd with 17 wins. A lot higher, well, not a lot higher, but a decent amount higher than what I had them in their range point for wins, and higher than the placement range that I had, where they were finishing anywhere between 5th or outside the top 8, because again, that unpredictability of if they have another poor start again, well, then they've just stuffed up another year kind of thing, right? So, but yeah, to their credit, they finished 3rd with 17 wins. So technically I was underrating them still, but geez, there's a lot of people that didn't even have Port Adelaide in their top 8 going into the 23 season. So I'll give myself a little applaud, I guess, for saying that they would be a team that would finish in the top 8, but I didn't think they'd finish top 4. So they played pretty well throughout the year. And in 5th, I had the Sydney Swans. So the runners-up in the 22 season, obviously losing to Geelong in that grand final, with a range of 14-16 wins and a rank range of 3rd to 6th. They finished 8th, barely making it into the top 8, and only really making it into the top 8 because Adelaide got screwed in their last home and away season game. So they barely made it in, and they got... it wasn't a spanking, but they got comfortably beat by a Carlton side who were pretty hungry going into the finals. So I would say this prediction is a bit wrong. It's right in the sense that I had them ranked to finish in the top 8, but I thought they'd finish higher in the top 8. I thought they'd be a team that would contend for a top 4 spot even, but a team that would not be finishing lower than 6th. And they finished 8th. And they only had, the 12 wins. So they were even lower than what I thought was their minimum. So even though I was right in the sense that they would finish top 8, I was wrong in every other aspect. They had a lot less wins. They had a lower range. And they just had a lot of things that were going on for them in that year where they just couldn't really get like their best football out consistently. So there was a few niggles that they had, and that normally does happen to sides that do finish runners up in a grand final. Normally the year after that they will tend to stumble a bit and kind of really lose their footing because they work so hard to get to that big dance and then to come up short, it could just be a bit demoralizing for a club. So I was a bit off with this prediction. They finished a little lower than where I had them rated. It is what it is. Now let's look at our top four that I had. Funnily enough, most of this top four is pretty spot on. It was pretty easy to read, but there is one that is a bit of a howler. But let's find out together how I had my top four.
So, to start our top four, we do have a team that has been the talk a lot in the AFL due to their
spot on
off-signing move,
off-season moves pretty much.
Whatnot. In fourth place, the Melbourne Demons at about 15 to 18 wins. Now, I do want to emphasize here, all these teams I have in the top four, all of them could finish first on the ladder. All of them could. If they just have... Now, this one I know is going to be a big shock considering the YouTube channel is built around it. But in third place, I do have our Geelong Wins. 16 to 18 wins. I think losing Selwood as a player for that team with his leadership will actually hurt the side more than you think.
Damn, man.
But in theory, we only really improved our depth. We got second place. I do have the Collingwood Magpies. As much as that kind of leaves a nasty taste in my mouth.
It's
I do think they are a team
right.
that has a lot of upside going to this year. 16 to 18 wins. A lot of people argue, or some people argue, that they were lucky to win those tight ones, but you still need a way to win those. It's not easy.
Just want to point out, by the way, not a lot of people had Collingwood rated even to finish in the top four going into the 23 season. But I did. I was the very few people that actually had faith in their game style to make it into the top four. So, little credit to me. Continue with the video.
And you probably should have guessed it by now, but the best team I've got for the 23 home and away season is the Brisbane Lions. 16 to 18
They finished
wins.
Second, but we'll get into that in a moment.
To the team that was considered the best team of the year in Geelong. In that prelim, it will sting a lot, but they will learn a lot from that, and they can only get better. They've got a great young core. They're going to be tough to beat it at the Gabba. And they're actually becoming a pretty decent MCG side despite that prelim loss. They kind of got all the core things that they need.
All right. So looking at my predictions here, I had the Demons in fourth. I had the Cats in third. I had the Pies in second. And on top of the ladder, I had the Lions. So let's go through it one by one in ascending order. So the Melbourne Demons. Now, this was pretty much, I think, the only one where I actually had it as spot on as you can get it. Fourth, the Demons. They finished indeed in fourth position in the 23 season. I had them between 15 to 18 wins. They had 16 wins and a range between first and fifth. Obviously, they finished fourth. So this prediction was actually pretty spot on. I had everything right there. Grundy, though, he wasn't actually that good of an acquisition as I had anticipated him to be in the making of this video. But they were still just a team that were just chugging along, just getting the wins that they knew that they could, and getting a few 50-50s here and there in their way to scrape along the wins that they did. So, they had, I think it was 10 or 11 home games at home. Realistically, they had about, I think it was 15 technical home games because they would have versed Collingwoods and stuff like that at the MCG where Collingwood was the home side. But, they won the games that they should have won, and they won the 50-50s that kind of helped them push to that kind of 15-16 win range. So this is a pretty spot-on prediction. Well done to me. Now this one's a bit unfortunate. This one's a heartbreaker, but again, if you are a proper fan of the Geelong Football Club and have been following the year that was in 23, you will understand why it went down the way it did. So at this moment of time of this recording, I had them finishing third with 16 to 18 wins. I knew there'd be naturally a bit of a slip because we did lose Selwood, and losing Selwood, honestly, I said it'll hurt us more than people would think, and it honestly did. The thing Selwood was doing, I don't think anyone really understands how important his role was to our side. But in saying that, we finished 12th with 10 wins. Like, well off the mark. Like, we were not a top 4 side at any point really throughout the season. There were times where we were barely scraping into the 8, even at the conclusion of a home and away round. And we just looked so off, you know. And look, don't get me wrong, injuries were a massive part of it, as they are with a lot of teams, right, that go into a year where they're suspected to do well and then they don't. It just felt like we couldn't get any players on the park, and we just had to rip players from our VFL side to just have a legal 22 players out there. You know what I mean? So injuries hurt us a lot. But in saying that, we probably still should have been good enough to have at least made the 8, kind of like in the similar vein or fashion that the Swans did. But we weren't. And that's the harsh reality of it. You know, I did think we did find some gold mines in Tanner Bruin. Tanner Bruin was really, really good for us. And I'm excited to see him go around again in 24. I think he's only going to get better. That kid was amazing. Bose probably still needs a bit more development. He could be good for us. Don't get me wrong. He could be great for us, but it's probably going to take time. So he's one that probably needs a bit more work. And Ollie Henry, Ollie was all right. He had his good moments. Inexperience kind of really showed in a few of the games, especially against the bigger clubs where he was prone to a lot of mistakes. But I think Ollie will be a good player for us. And in the next 5 years' time, when Hawkins is inevitably out the doors and Cameron starts to become that kind of slowly aging forward, Ollie Henry will probably legitimately become our new key forward, right? Assuming he stays as a forward and doesn't get developed into a backman or something like that. So I have high hopes for Ollie Henry, and I feel like he can be a great player for us. But similar to Bose, he's going to need time to really come out to full fruition. But he can be great for us. But yeah, just a lot of injuries, a lot of other issues we had, and just losing games that we probably shouldn't have lost. Bit of a poor season, a poor prediction in hindsight. And, hopefully in 24 we do a bit better. I do think we will naturally do better. I think we should be a top 8 side. But I'll get into more details on that in my next prediction video. In second place, I had the Collingwood Magpies. I had them finishing with 16 to 18 wins, a top 4 finish, and they did finish on top of the ladder. So they finished with 18 wins, which is the max of what I had them, and they finished first, which was naturally the max. Pretty spot on. I didn't think they'd be the best team going into the year. I thought really it was either them or the other team that we will get into a moment that would be the team that would potentially win the flag in 23, or just be on top of the ladder. So this one, pretty spot on. And as I mentioned before, not many people had them rated in top 4, and I couldn't understand why. There's a very good, yeah, sure. In 22, they had a lot of close games, especially against sides that, to be honest, weren't great sides. We're talking mid-table sides, and they were struggling to barely get the win. But what made them so good wasn't by how much they were winning the games by. It was the fact that they were winning them. When a game is in the balance and anyone could walk away with the win, the good teams will find a way to make sure they're the ones on the winning end of it. Almost always. So that's why I had a lot of faith in the Magpies to do really well going to the 23 season. And, well, in hindsight, they were the best team of the year. No arguments about that. For the majority of the year, they were the best side. Brisbane had their moments where they were probably considered the best side in the comp. Melbourne was here and there a little bit. Even Carlton was talked about in a couple of rounds. But I think for 18, 19 of the 22 weeks in the home and away season, Collingwood were just talked as like the best side in the comp. So well deserved, to their credit. Played really well throughout the whole year, and obviously it got them to a flag and first place on the ladder as well. And then in my last prediction, who I had as the minor premiers, I had the Brisbane Lions with 16 to 18 wins with the same range. They finished second with 17 wins. So again, this one was pretty spot on, but naturally I needed to probably swap Collingwood and Brisbane in my prediction to be spot on. But I had my top two pretty solidified. It was really close between Brisbane and Collingwood for who I had as my minor premier. We're talking in the moment of recording this video, it was by a win difference. And naturally, as I can see here by the ladder, Collingwood had finished 18th. Collingwood had finished with 18 wins and Brisbane 17 wins, and first and second accordingly. So Brisbane, I had to be a side that would be on the rise up. They got absolutely demolished in a prelim, but they had a lot of good talent in their side. And ignoring that massive loss they had to Geelong, where Geelong in 22, they were just an unstoppable force after round 9. They were becoming a good MCG side, which, whether you like it or not, is key for your side to not just winning more games in general, but winning the big games when it matters, right? The finals and stuff like that. And if you can make it all the way to the grand final itself. Winning games at the MCG will win you games in the AFL, if that makes sense, right? Yes, win your home games if you can. I think Brisbane didn't drop a game at home to memory. They might have dropped one. I'm not sure. I think they won all their games at the Gabba, though, which obviously is a tick. That's 11 wins already sorted. And then they just needed to find their 7 in other parts of the league, and they were able to do that to finish, not 7, 6 wins throughout the competition. They were able to do that pretty easily. So, Brisbane were a good enough side to finish in the top 2, and I had them predicted first, but they finished second. But again, that was pretty much spot on. So there you have it. The full wrap up here, as you can see here, this is how the 23 season finished out in terms of the actual ladder. And honestly, overall, I think I did okay with my predictions. There wasn't actually that many howlers when you really think about it. The only true howlers I had was North Melbourne. I didn't think was going to finish bottom 4, and they did. Another howler was obviously the Geelong one, where I thought we would finish top 4, and we finished 12th. The other howlers was maybe Sydney. I thought they would finish 5th, and they finished 8th. The Giants was a bit of a howler too. Well, actually, it was quite a massive howler. I had them finishing in the bottom 2, and they finished 7th. That was a massive, massive oversight. And same with St Kilda as well. I had them finishing in the bottom 4, and they finished in the top 6. But aside from that, I think most of them were pretty much on the mark. Richmond, I had them finishing 8th. They finished 13th. That's a bit of a howler. But aside from that, most of it was more or less online. I don't really know what my plus or minus would be in terms of what I had them predicted versus where they actually finished, but I don't think I did that bad. So there's the video. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, please leave a like, subscribe if you're new, turn the notification bell on. I will be trying to post more videos going into the new 24 season, and I should have my 24 prediction video up and running soon. So you can kind of have a look there to see where I think all the teams will finish once again. And then in another X amount of months' time, after the 24 season is concluded, we'll go through it again and see how right or wrong I was. So again, thank you for watching. Catch you later in the next one.